3, 2, 1. What's happening, guys? It's Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful Tuesday evening. We're changing every day moving forward. I swear, at this time and rate of the off season, you can't help it. There's so many things happening. Schedules are changing left and right. And you know what? It's the off season, and we can come on here and do it whenever we want. So here we are. We've got a good amount of things to talk about this evening. We've got the 2025 schedule released. Dustin, also me, we got to watch on the ACC network, our favorite TV network ever to watch a sporting event on or any kind of news. There's just nothing better than being able to tune in to the ACC network and their awesome range of just wonderful commercials that you get to spend hours watching. But we do have the schedule release. Florida State has 7 home games and 5 road games, and we're going to go a deep dive into that. We're also going to talk about Florida State's rough stretch in the November month of the season, but Florida State might have a good start to the season to gain some momentum. We'll give our thoughts on that. We're also going to jump into a quarterback that decommitted from Florida State's upcoming class. We're also going to talk about Florida State going and making some offers there on the recruiting trail as well. Florida State landing 2 commitments too the last time we talked to you guys. And then we're going to talk newcomer interviews, including Thomas Castellanos, Luke Pettibon, and Squirrel White. So we got a handful of things to go through with you guys. With me this evening is Austin Veazey, our lead basketball writer, and over to the other side is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
It's good to be back, and it's good to actually be able to talk about some real football here and, get into the meat a little bit of what FSU is going to go through in 2025.
Yeah, get to start setting plans, even though it's January and some of these games aren't for, 8 to 10 months. Start booking hotels, get reservations made. It's good to have something to actually look forward to again.
Yep, man. We got the fate of when Florida State's going to be facing East Texas A&M, like things that I've just been looking forward to.
I think we knew that already, right?
We've had that for
I thought so.
A year.
We knew the date of it?
Yeah. It was just the ACC stuff we didn't know.
Oh, dang it, man.
You're behind.
Dude, just late. Yeah, I'm late to the party there. I'm late to the party. But yeah, we got the schedule release we're going to talk about. And I think, too, hearing from Thomas Castellanos, something that I think all of us on here, we were wanting to hear from him, get his thoughts, too, on his departure from Boston College. Interested to get y'all's takes on what he had to say about that. But before we get started, make sure you hit that like button. If you're here on YouTube with us, subscribe. We'll notify you every time we release a video like we did earlier today with Thomas Castellanos. We'll have tons of player interviews going out from those pressers. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss one of those videos going out. So let's get started, gentlemen. Florida State, this upcoming season is massive for Mike Norvell and his future in Tallahassee. There is so much pressure on his shoulders, along too with the new staff that he brought in with Tony White on the defensive coordinator side, and then also to Gus Malzahn, Florida State's new offensive coordinator, who is also going to be your play caller. There's a lot of things riding on this season, and Florida State gets to face off against Alabama to begin the season on August 30th. We all knew the season opener for a very long time, but the Seminoles getting that start there. I don't know if we need to go deeper into a discussion there on that because we've talked about it pretty heavily, but now getting some more info here. We'll just start in September and we can recap it. But Florida State in week 2 is going to face East Texas A&M, an FCS school, on September 6th. And then Florida State's going to have an early bye week in week 3 and then jump into a game against Kent State in week 4 on September 20th. So Florida State starting off really, really hot there and a big opponent in Alabama, but then easing into their beginning of the 2025 campaign. After week 4, when Florida State just got done facing Kent State at home, they're going to go on the road, their first ACC road game against Virginia on September 26th. That team finished 5-7 in 2024. They're hoping to turn things around as well up there. But seems like before we jump into October, seems like Florida State, outside of that Alabama game, it's kind of easing them into this upcoming season for Mike Norvell and company.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what Florida State needed because, you look at 2024 and It was pretty tough out of the gate, starting off against two ACC opponents back to back with how many new pieces that Florida State team was breaking in, taking on a top group of 5 team in Memphis who, they were getting projected to potentially make the college football playoff at the beginning of the year. And then now you look at 2025, yeah, you're going to have that high profile opener against Alabama, but obviously Florida State, like you said, Logan, going to have a slightly new offense, adjusting things on defense, a lot of new pieces coming in, some returning players that you're hoping will step into bigger roles as well. That game against East Texas A&M and also Kent State, who went 0-12 last year, it's going to give Florida State a chance to kind of find a rhythm and figure things out before they start a slate of 8 straight conference games, which I also think it benefits FSU to kick things off with Virginia, because like you noted, not the best program in 2024, and ideally the Seminoles should be 3-1 at the minimum coming out of September if everything goes to plan.
Yeah, really my only minor complaint is I wish the Kent State game and the bye week were switched around, because that Virginia game is a Friday night, and starting your ACC slate, on a Friday night on the road is never an easy thing. And Virginia, yeah, they were 5-7, but they were a little frisky last year. They, held in there with Clemson, beat Boston College, who we all thought was, decent for a little bit, beat Pitt on the road, I think. So they weren't the worst team. And, who knows how that team will look in year 3 under new head coach. So, you can only gripe too much about this start, but ideally I think the bye week in Kent State would have been flipped.
Yeah, it certainly would have been nicer to have that. But, for me, I think Florida State having that game against Alabama, I mean, Lord knows what's going to be going on there, because I think in that case for Gus Malzahn and what Mike Norvell tried to build for that game plan, I would use Thomas Castellanos in every kind of exotic way possible, because who cares? It's the first game of the season. Florida State, of course, wants to build some momentum, but man, for the fan base, this game can stay competitive. Would be very, very nice in order to bring back the fandom, because I think a lot of it right now, there's a massive amount of question marks in FSU fans' heads of what this team is going to look like. A lot of new names, like I said, a lot of new coaching staff as well. But to show that you're competitive in this, I think you got to do some wild things and try to get creative with how you utilize Thomas Castellanos and some of the other personnel that you're able to bring in through the transfer portal in that first game. But it is an easier groove into the season, which Florida State needs to build up confidence. They've got to find confidence, because I think it was completely shot, as it should be after a 2-10 campaign and season last year. But this start to the season helps you, makes it easier for you to do that. And week 6, though, on October 4th, we're going into October here. Florida State is going to be facing the Miami Hurricanes. This is always a big rivalry game here. Cam Ward and Mario Cristobal coming away with the win in their own house. And that was definitely, we were there for that one. It was actually a lot more people than I thought there were going to be. But still, Florida State lost that game. They get them back at home this upcoming season. And then Pitt comes into town, which is another home matchup for the Florida State Seminoles on October 11th. And then the Seminoles will go on the road for their last game in October, and will be facing Stanford on October 18th, a big cross-country road trip for the Seminoles and Stanford. And I, just real quick, penciling Pitt there, they're a team that are always feisty and can compete very well and are coached well and highly disciplined too. And then you look at Miami, you got to think, what we discussed it plenty on here since the news came out that Carson Beck was going to be transferring over to Miami. There's a lot of things that are on the shoulders of literally that recovery that he's going through with that elbow, and seeing how close he is to 100% when that game comes around for the Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah, that's obviously going to be a huge thing to focus on leading up to that matchup between FSU and Miami. Just how recovered is Carson Beck from that elbow injury that he suffered, which, as we know, it seems like it's going to take him a while with the rehab process this offseason after previously undergoing surgery. And that was something that we kind of pinpointed a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the Miami matchup, just how early would it fall in this 2025 season. And, I still think that's at a point where I'm not sure if Beck will be at 100%. So it'll be something to watch. But yeah, it certainly ramps up a little bit for Florida State in October. Like you mentioned, Pittsburgh, always a tough program. And I believe they got off to 7-0 start or something like that last year. I mean, they were very competitive in the ACC, so that one will be a good one. And then Florida State making that West Coast trip out to Stanford, haven't had to deal with one of those yet. And, we saw on the flip side, Cal coming from the West Coast to Tallahassee struggled in that matchup and lost. And then Miami traveling out to the West Coast to face Cal and struggled there and were nearly upset by the Golden Bears. So you have to wonder how that travel fatigue kind of plays into things. And, it'll be something that we've never quite seen before for Florida State. The first matchup between FSU and Stanford on the football field.
Yeah, on one hand, it's nice to get that Miami game early in the season, like we are talking about either last week or the week before with Carson Beck. Who knows how that elbow will be? But then you look at Miami's schedule; they have a bye week not only before but after that game, so they can, essentially dive 3 weeks of game prep into that one game. That's tough for Florida State. Even if Florida State's getting the one extra day of rest from playing on Friday the week before, I mean, that's definitely a disadvantage to have that many weeks of prep to go into it. They played Florida the week before that first bye week, so definitely going to be interesting to see how that one works out. I think Pitt and Stanford pretty much have to be wins if Florida State wants to have any kind of season they want to have. But as you just mentioned, going out west and playing Stanford's never easy, even if they're losing their best player in Alec Manor.
Mm-hmm. And then the fun begins for Florida State in the month of November. And to me, this is where, we'll see where Florida State's at going into this month, but this is where some games are really, really important whenever you're fighting to be in the top 2 of the ACC to hopefully get back to Charlotte. But on November 1st, they'll face Wake Forest in week 10. And then Florida State in their next game on November 8th in week 11. The Seminoles will go on the road to face Dabo Swinney in Death Valley, the defending ACC champions. They're bringing back Cade Klubnik as well, and they've garnered a lot of momentum going into this next season as well. And then after that game in week 12, they will face Virginia Tech at home. It will be FSU Senior Day. Virginia Tech went 6-7 last year as well. And then another game here where Florida State has always had some problems and fits with as an FSU fan. It's always a nightmare. It's NC State in week 13 on November 21st. Has always been a difficult matchup. Florida State has lost, I believe, the last 5 out of the 7 games in Carter Finley Stadium. I've been there a few times, not the most fun atmosphere or experience to be in if you're wearing garnet and gold. And then the season finale happens when Florida State will go on the road to Gainesville with the Florida Gators in the Swamp on November 29th. And, Florida finding some momentum too as well behind their young quarterback and DJ Lagway finishing the season at 8-5, where previously we were not thinking Billy Napier was going to be making it through that season with how tough of a schedule it was, but he made it through, and they're believing a lot in what they have in their quarterback as well. But last time Florida State was in the Swamp, they came away with the win with some of their backup quarterbacks like Tate Rodemaker and Brock Lynn as well. It's craziness how much time has changed and everything's just flipped away, and that's what happens now with the transfer portal and time's changing. But y'all's thoughts on this November stretch? It is a very challenging one for Florida State and Mike Norvell, man. It is not going to be an easy task.
Yeah, to say the very least. I mean, it is absolutely brutal, especially, outside of that Wake Forest game, you're going to play 4 straight games against teams that made a bowl game or college football playoff in 2024. And 3 of those coming on the road and probably the most hostile environments that Florida State's going to see all season. We know about Death Valley. Outside of that win in 2023, it's been 10 years. Well, I mean, now 12 years since Florida State defeated Clemson on the road. So just one road win in the last 12 years against the Tigers. Logan, you kind of went into it against North Carolina State, who has ended some successful Florida State seasons over the last decade plus. Virginia Tech returning veteran quarterback Kyron Drones, who, has been there for a while, and that'll be an interesting game to watch. And Florida, blowing out Florida State in the regular season finale. We'll see how DJ Lagway continues to progress, but it's going to be an absolutely crucial stretch, and I feel like those 4 games are really going to decide Florida State's 2025 season.
Yeah, I've got beef with the ACC for this November stretch. Not even just this November stretch, but 2 road games coming on Friday nights sucks. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That absolutely sucks. A little bit of history. Do you know the last time Florida State played 2 road games on a midweek?
2008.
Further, 2004, and it doesn't even technically count because they opened the season at Miami on a Friday night, but also in that season played NC State on the road the week before playing Florida on a midweek game. So yeah, I kind of don't like the ACC for what they did, especially this November stretch. I mean, Virginia Tech was no slouch last year, gave a lot of teams a lot of issues, and even if they're losing Bysol Tootin or however you say his first name, and a couple pieces on that defensive line, can't discount Kyron Jones. That entire November stretch is really, really difficult. How Florida State's going to navigate those and some of those incredibly hostile environments between Death Valley, Carter Finley, and the Swamp. I mean, that's tough.
Yeah, those road games are going to be wild ones. I think we'll be at quite a bit of those, honestly, about all of them almost practically.
Mhm.
I mean, we've been there. We saw how it was in Death Valley when Florida State, Jordan Travis, Keon Coleman there making that play at the end of the game to come away with the win. You know, that is a wild environment, and to just think that Florida State, with what they showed us last year, have to go in there and try to come away with the win. Not going to be easy whatsoever, too, with a complete roster rehaul. And, I think a lot of this, it's hard to even project much of anything because of how much of change is happening on the coaching staff, or has happened with the coaching staff, but also, too, with the personnel and the transfers that you brought in, some players that you were going to be expecting to have immediate impact. It's tough to project kind of how Florida State is going to look when we go into this rough stretch of November. I'm scared to think of it, at this point. And, we all had some projections last year of what this team was going to look like and make it to that ACC championship in a back-to-back type of scenario. But we were completely wrong on that. So any kind of projections or predictions, don't clip us. That's all I got to say. Don't clip us. Any other thoughts on the schedule release, gentlemen?
Yeah, just with that brutal November, it makes it even more important for Florida State to get off to a fast start if they want to get back to the postseason. And then also during my research, I think this is just the second time in the last 20 years that Florida State has played its last 2 regular season games on the road. So not something you see very often for Florida State. Like Austin said, didn't get very many favors from the ACC. I wonder if that lawsuit is on anyone's minds.
Probably. I'm also beefing with the 2. There's 3 games in kind of my Charlotte area between Virginia, NC State, and Clemson, and 2 of them are on a Friday night, which makes it even harder to get there. So I'm really just not a fan of the ACC this week.
You're never a fan of the ACC.
Yeah, that's true.
Is, though.
That's true.
Yeah.
But it's even less so this week.
Yeah, it's even deeper now. All right, let's keep moving on here, gentlemen. Florida State loses out on their top quarterback commit, Brady Smigel, a 4-star quarterback in the 2026 class, ranked as the number 5th quarterback in the class and number 10th recruit out of California. But this one, Gus Malzahn and made a couple of visits, and I think we're trying to bring in a visit from Smigel. D'Lo, you'll probably be able to confirm that or not. But the Seminoles, I don't think, as FSU fans that watched film on him and saw the way that he played, we're going to be too shocked maybe from this decommitment. First off, he went 2-10 last year. Let's just go ahead and put that out there real quick. Went 2-10. That needs to be start off number 1. But number 2, just a play style that he plays at as a quarterback. And then you watch a guy that's about to be starting for you to kick off this season with Thomas Castellanos is a complete different type of QB. Smigel is not a guy that's going to be a dual threat type of guy. He's got an arm, absolutely, but with his legs and what Florida State wants to do moving forward with quarterbacks that they want to bring in to fit the style of offense, it just didn't make too much sense. And, I'm interested to see what, Gus Malzahn said to him, and being completely transparent. And, I don't think this was too much of a crazy shock to anybody that kept up with his recruitment.
Yeah, maybe not a big surprise because it's been trending a little bit this way. as of late, as Smigel has continued to pick up new suitors and, seen Ohio State make him a big priority since the beginning of the year. But I mean, this is definitely someone that Florida State wanted to keep in the class. Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn were up in California earlier this month to meet with Brady and his father, talk about their vision for the offense, how things are going to change. And, they're hoping to get him back in Tallahassee at some point this spring, just to continue building that relationship. And, obviously Tony Tokar is still around on the staff as well, who had recruited Smigel pretty hard and helped net that early commitment last summer. But yeah, I think, the evolving offense at Florida State and Smigel just not quite being sure how it's going to work out on paper at this moment just caused them to kind of reevaluate things. And, he's decided to reopen his recruitment. And we saw that some of his top schools at the moment are Ohio State, State, Michigan, Washington, South Carolina, and UCLA. And, South Carolina head coach was out there recently to meet with him. The only visit that he took to another school while he was committed to Florida State was Washington. But it really seems like since the end of the season, he's decided to look elsewhere a little bit. And, ultimately he's going to end up at another program at the college level. So it's a disappointing loss because he's certainly an elite prospect. I think he's going to be one of the top quarterbacks in this 2026 class. And, you can talk about the fit in the offense or whatever, but, you look at his stats. This was someone who showed his progression as a rusher and a scrambler during his junior season. And it seemed like he was only continuing to make those progressions, but we'll see. Florida State, they've put out 3 new quarterback offers and they're moving quickly in their search of a new signal caller for the Tribe 26 class.
Florida State still holds a top 10 class in the 2026 recruiting cycle. It's Smigel, not Smigel. Smigel. Okay. So yeah, Smigel no longer with the Florida State Seminoles in this 2026 class. But like you said, they're after 3 other quarterbacks making some quick offers after losing him. Let's talk about a few or all 3 of these guys. Let's start off with Landon Duckworth. He got an offer from Florida State. Looking at his ranking, he's ranked as the number 5th quarterback, number 4 in Alabama. Now, how is that related to Smigel and the quarterback rankings? Was this a 247 Sports composite, or is this per 247 Sports their own?
This one, I believe, just the 247 Sports ranking.
Gotcha.
And I mean, Smigel, I think 247 Sports is not as high on him as some of the other recruiting networks, but then you look at Rivals, they've got Smigel as a 5-star.
Oh, wow. Okay. Gotcha. But here still, Duckworth still in that range, being highly touted as a quarterback in this 2026 class. Some other schools too. He's ranked as the number 4th prospect coming out of Alabama, number 66th overall. He's got some notable offers from Georgia and Ole Miss as well. Thoughts on this one, Dustin, because of course the stats look really appealing, leading Jackson High School in Alabama to a 14-1 record in the state championship, threw for 3,400 yards, 39 touchdowns, had 10 interceptions, but also had 648 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns on the ground.
Yeah, I think this is the one I'm looking at the most as far as these 3 early quarterback offers that Florida State has put out since Smigel's decommitment. And I mean, that's simply due to Duckworth's previous relationship with Malzahn dating back to their time at UCF, when he was the head coach. The Knights were recruiting him pretty heavily. He was in Orlando for multiple visits, built a pretty good relationship with Malzahn, and I think Florida State, they're going to pursue him very hard, try and get him on campus, because this could very well be the guy that Malzahn wants in his system, just like Thomas Castellanos.
Yeah, that relationship there with Gus could play a vital part in trying to get him over here and try to build and like you said, try to get the guy that fits his system the best. This next one, we'll go through these next 2 actually. Keyshawn Henderson and Bowie Bentley. These 2 guys also got some offers from Florida State. Actually, Henderson was committed to Houston since May, but opened some visits up, including a planned trip to Florida State this upcoming spring. He threw for almost 2,700 yards, 25 touchdowns, and rushed for 341 yards with 7 touchdowns on the ground. And then Bowie Bentley, he garnered Bo or Bowie?
Bo.
I'm messing with you. But he threw for 3,200 yards, 47 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, but also had almost 1,000 yards rushing with 923 and 16 touchdowns on the ground, ranked as the number 11th quarterback in his class. Yeah, how about these two guys for quarterback prospects?
Yeah, some interesting names because, you look at all three of these guys, they're already national recruits. They've got top programs coming after them. And Florida State, maybe getting into the picture a little bit late, but they're obviously going to have a lot of attention on these three guys moving forward. Henderson, an absolute dynamic athlete, a guy with a very high ceiling, and, just a junior about to go into his senior season. But he actually participated in the Navy All-American Bowl alongside some of the top high school prospects in the country and ended up being named the MVP of that showcase. And since that performance, he's picked up offers from, obviously FSU, but Auburn, North Carolina, Ole Miss, and Georgia. So even though he's committed to Houston and he's also a Houston native, you're seeing these top Power 4 programs get involved here, and we'll see how that goes. He's committed for now, but we'll see if he begins to actually take some of those visits and step foot on campus elsewhere. But certainly a very talented guy. And then Bo Bentley, a trending name nationally. This junior season was his first year as a starting quarterback at the high school level. And Logan, you read off those stats. He had a pretty impressive year. Over 4,000 total yards, 47 passing touchdowns, 16 rushing scores. Led his team to an undefeated record, 16-0, and a state championship. First year as a starter. Let me say that again. He was also at the Navy All-American Bowl, and both him and Henderson are two of the very best prospects in the state of Texas. I think, well, obviously, the biggest thing for Florida State is to get these guys on campus, continue to foster those relationships, and it's going to be something to watch. They're going full speeds ahead here, and obviously you've got Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn who can help out in these recruitments alongside Tony Tokarz.
I think a lot of these quarterback recruitments, D-Lou, are going to come on what they show on the field this season. If I'm a quarterback or the family of the quarterback as a recruit, I'd like to see what the product looks like first, and a lot goes into it. First, got to see how Gus Malzahn works here in Tallahassee, but also, too, Mike Norvell's involvement. Gus is going to be the play caller, but also to Tony Tokarz, quarterback development. Got to see if things mesh well and early before some quarterbacks make their decisions. Yes, they'll come in for visits or start building those relationships and having those conversations. But I think on the field, at least to me, if I was a recruit, I'd like to see what we're working with first. I'd like to see that, because what happened last year was disastrous as an offense. Yes, it's going to be different. I understand that. But I think I'm leaning towards, as this offseason goes, I am leaning towards I need to see a lot of things before I jump to any kind of predictions or any kind of, thinking that things are going to look great for FSU next year.
We'll see how it goes, with the way the recruiting process is and these guys signing their letters of intent in December rather than February. A lot of the times it's about go ahead and, getting that spot early so someone else isn't able to get it. Especially quarterback, Florida State only going to be taking one quarterback in that 2026 class. And if there's a guy who wants to hop on the boat who has the opportunity to do so, they might want to go ahead and do that so they don't lose their spot later on. And that's why I go back to a name like Landon Duckworth, who already has that familiarity with Gus Malzahn, knows what he wants to do on offense, and, nearly committed to him at UCF. So I think that's especially one that Florida State fans should be watching here moving forward.
Yeah. Yep. I know FSU's put in a tough spot. That's what they put themselves into, though. So I'm interested to see how they work and building these relationships with the quarterbacks and being able to show them, hey, what we show you out on the field this year is going to be good. We promise it won't be as awful as you saw on TV, on your TVs in 2024. Florida State, though, on the other side, grabbing some commitments. Florida State first in this 2025 class, not done yet. Seminoles grabbing 4-star offensive tackle Chasten Brown. He committed to Florida State on his official visit to the Seminoles on Sunday. 6'9", could be, I don't know, 6'7", 6'9". I don't know. Everybody's got different heights for different people. We'll wait until things become official, but when he arrives. But 270 pounds. Definitely will need some development there, but ranked as the number 21st offensive tackle in the 2025 class per 247 Sports. But Herb Hand getting some help there.
Why the emphasis?
I just giving them their credit here.
Woke me up, but
that's what we needed.
A nice pickup for Florida State here late in the 2025 class, and I don't think this one comes as a major surprise because Brown has been trending to Florida State ever since they brought over Herb Hand and Gus Malzahn in December. Didn't visit another program before making this pledge to Florida State. He was actually previously committed to Malzahn and Herb Hand when they were with the Knights. Backed off that decision after both left the program. And, he was going to sign during the early signing period, but after reopening his recruitment, decided to take things to February. And in the end, that benefits Florida State here, where, you get a guy who could develop into a prototypical offensive tackle at the next level. Like you said, Logan, can't teach that size. Between 6'7" and 6'9", we'll see what he does end up listed at. But the biggest thing is he's only 270 pounds right now. You see pictures of him. He probably looks a little bit more like a basketball player than an offensive tackle. So I think he's more of a developmental guy. You're going to get to build him up through the weight room and on the practice field over the next couple of seasons. But the potential, the ceiling, definitely sky high here. And, this is already a guy who wanted to play under Herb Hand at the college level, and now he's going to get a chance to do so in Tallahassee.
I want to say 6'7" or not, 6'9", 6'7's tall as hell too. I don't give a damn. So, definitely can't teach that. And Herb Hand, with his development, he is riding on that for that to be the case for him and improving as a tackle at the collegiate level. Now, Florida State, though, did grab a local guy, which is rare, feels like sometimes for the Seminoles, but going over to Mariana and grabbing a running back in the 2026 class rated as a 4-star as well. He is in his junior season, he ran for 1,880 rushing yards, 34 touchdowns on 153 carries. Plus, he also had 247 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. He had 9 games with 100+ rushing yards, including a season high 383 yards and 6 touchdowns in a game this last season. He's ranked as the number 24th running back per 247 Sports. Now the Seminoles are ranked, I guess I should have added, now their FSU's class is ranked number 9th nationally after grabbing this addition after Smigel's decommitment.
Yeah, that's at least what it was whenever I wrote that article that you're reading off of. But yeah, Amari Clemens, commits to Florida State over some other Power 4 offers. And this is a guy, another one who has kind of been trending to the Seminoles. He was on campus in December after Florida State revamped their coaching staff. And then he's been back in Tallahassee the last 2 weekends at each of these first 2 junior days of 2025. I believe he brought his mom this past weekend. And, that seemed to be the selling point in this recruitment. And Florida State getting a very talented local guy, explosive speed. I don't say this lightly, but he's got a little bit of Dalvin Cook in him, in my opinion. Doesn't play in necessarily the greatest division in Florida, but you look at how productive this guy is and, how fast he's able to get away from the defense and these productive games that he's having. He could certainly have a future at the college level, and another one where once he gets to Florida State and he has all of these resources and a college strength and conditioning program and a nutrition program, that's going to be really big for this guy in his future. But, going to be a nice one for Florida State, bringing in to add to a young backfield that's already got some other guys like Cam Davis, Mekhi Danzy, Samuel Singleton, obviously Chroma, who are still going to be early in their careers when this guy does get to campus.
He ran 383 yards in one game and had 6 touchdowns. That's a total offense for what we saw All right, I'm roasting FSU too much from 2024, but that's how much Florida State's offense showed. And 3 games put together. Let's see. So that was the wrap up there on the recruiting side for Florida State. Let's jump over to some newcomer interviews, gentlemen. We actually got to hear from Thomas Castellanos for the first time. Also, Luke Pettibon, the Wake Forest center transfer, which I'm very, very excited for, and sounds just like the center that I want to have on my team. And then also Squirrel White, the Tennessee wide receiver transfer. What are some of y'all's takeaways from what you heard? I mean, Castellanos spent a lot of time talking about leadership and the bonds that he's been growing with a lot of these transfers, also played a big part in grabbing some of those wide receivers like Squirrel White, along with even Pettibon also mentioned that Thomas Castellanos was in his DMs immediately after he entered the transfer portal, and then of course did some work there with Deuce Span. That's going to take a little while to just eliminate that from my brain. But Deuce Robinson, what did y'all hear from Thomas Castellanos that you guys liked today?
I was impressed. Very, very mature, laid back guy. And, it sounds like in his early time at Florida State, everything is going how he expected. He mentioned how this was his dream growing up, and he had multiple family members attend Florida State, including former FSU star running back and 2013 national champion Devontae Freeman. Him and Castellanos are related. But I think the one thing that stood out to me, well, I guess 2 things that stood out to me is, first, he talked about the quarterback room and talked about how they have helped him ease his transition to Florida State. And he specifically mentioned Brock Glenn as a guy who's been there helping him out a lot so far early in his days in Tallahassee, but also, talking about the leadership aspect at Florida State. And, this is a quote from him. He mentioned he felt like they were lacking leadership a little bit. So I just feel like they were missing leadership, or missing someone who can lead them and guide them and who really cares about them. And then went on to say, I love the guys, love everyone here. Our bond is already so tight and our chemistry is so good. And, he mentioned how this time in the offseason is so important for these guys and building that bond, building that chemistry for when things get rolling in 2025. So like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, I think Thomas Castellanos has come into Florida State with the right identity. He wants to grab the reins of the offense and that leadership role. And he's not going to be a guy afraid to speak up and keep guys accountable, but he's also doing a good job of connecting with these guys, going to what you said, Logan, as far as him reaching out to Luke Pettibon. And, Pettibon went on to mention that when he got to town, Castellanos actually came over, helped him move in, and he's been reaching out to him to make sure that Pettibon is comfortable, at Florida State. So, he's taken that role and running with it.
Yeah, you mentioned pretty much everything I was going to talk about, between the quote about there wasn't leadership at Florida State last year, which, well, you're doing your job. That's what happens. But just talking about how there wasn't leadership at Florida State last year, which we all knew, but it's also important for cat.
Oh, holy smokes! You just get Marvin Jones over the middle.
Kind of.
Nigel Bradham, bang.
But it was important for someone to come in and be like, hey, they didn't have leadership last year. I can be that guy, that can really connect this locker room and make sure we have good chemistry. And then to your point about being there when Luke Pettibon moved in, helping him moved in, that's something I don't know if it's something you would expect, more or less, but it was, cool to note. I think the other thing I would want to say from his, introductory press conference, besides just being like you said, very mature, very well spoken, not afraid to answer questions about what went wrong at BC last year. He's like, hey, some of the stuff that's out there isn't exactly true, which, BC fans want to lie about, which is fine. I didn't know they had fans to begin with. But just, he answered everything the way he needed to. And, very nice guys. After every single person, like, hey, nice to meet you. Glad to be here. So very, very, very good introductory press conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's different than what you had with DJU a little bit. This guy is definitely an extrovert, one that wants to put himself out there, and not saying that DJU didn't want to be involved in a lot of things, but Castellanos, going out and showing some love once Pettibon arrived in Tallahassee and wanting to be hands-on and helping him move in. I think that's something that not only happen there, but you're seeing across the board, just seeing some social media and some posts and everything, being around teammates also too, to some of the basketball games. He's leading a lot of the FSU football players around the tuck and everything. You're seeing that he wants to jump into that leadership role, like he mentioned, because he saw that Florida State did not have a lot of that last year. That's something that Mike Norvell completely missed on. That was probably the biggest thing that Mike Norvell, that failure from last year, was seeing that he didn't have any leaders. He thought he did, but I think some of us from the outside noticed that they did not. I mean, I was mentioning it after seeing the spring. I was like, you're missing some guys that you can rely on to step up, and they really just need a leader, and they lacked that in a lot of departments. Yes, you saw some guys step up later in the season, but Thomas Castellanos now is stepping into that role, taking that and embracing it. And I think that's something that Florida State needs, because they need someone that they can rely on, and one that is going to fight for them both on the field and verbally, because we know how talented he is as a playmaker. But leadership as a vocal person, I think, is going to help this team, and they're going to need it. Going over to Luke Pettibon, though, this guy sounds like a center to me. I don't know about y'all. He's not here to just.
That was my exact first thought. Like, yeah, he sounds like a center that's been playing for 5 years.
Yeah, and you know what? He backed himself up on it. He said, "I feel like I played at a very high level and the ACC in this conference, and I feel like whatever Herb Hand wants me to do on this offensive line, I can do it. I think that I'm one of the best, though, as being a center. But yeah, not over here just to screw around and just shoot the shit. This guy's pretty straightforward, and I love it. I think a lot of FSU fans are going to like him, and also mention too the relationship that he's starting to build with Castellanos, and also to a lot of the current players that are already in Tallahassee. He was saying everyone's welcome to me with open arms, and that's something that I appreciate.
And he had a great quote on leadership as well, because he was asked if he's wanting to come in and take on a leadership role. This was a guy who obviously was at Wake Forest for 5 years, but also was a team captain for the Demon Deacons as well. And I thought his response was interesting. He said, "I don't think leadership can be faked. I think as a new guy, the first thing you have to do is build trust if you want to be a leader." And I don't have the rest of the full quote here, but he went on to say he's just focused on doing his job, being a good teammate, and if he happens to work himself into a leadership role, he'll do the best he can, regardless. But he just said that that's something that's built over time. So we'll see. We'll see about that if he is able to grow into that leadership role. Also mentioned that he believes he can play center at Florida State, obviously, but can shift down to guard. Going to see how Herb Hand wants to utilize him. And it seemed like that relationship, that bond with Herb Hand, played a big part in him coming to Florida State, because originally he was going to head back to Wake Forest. And then obviously the head coach retired, and that kind of threw him into a little bit of a conundrum. But he came down to Florida State. He said, Mike Norvell, Gus Malzahn, and Herb Hand all welcomed him to campus and showed his family a lot of respect. And it felt like home, not only to him, but also his parents. And, he said he sat down with Herb Hand, had some good talks about on the field stuff and schemes. But what really impressed him was their connection at a personal level. He said he's looking for a coach that not only can develop him into a better player, but also just a guy that he can have a regular conversation with from time to time. So it seemed like Herb Hand was really relatable. And then, Logan, you kind of brought it up, but Florida State already embracing him into the locker room, and that's something that's helped him out as well.
I think the other thing I would add is I feel like he was listening to our podcast. He initially, like right away, I don't know right away, but like the second or third question, he's like, I mean, yeah, the system's pretty similar. I know a lot of people are talking about slow mesh, and you take the slow mesh out, counter still counter, power still power, everything's still the same. It's still pretty similar. So I don't know if he was listening or not, but he doesn't seem concerned at all about the transition from slow mesh to more run focused offense here with Gus Malzahn, and I think it's a good fit. That room definitely needed some maturity and some leadership, and just from what we saw in the 8-minute press conference, he looks like he's going to be that guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think too, just finding the glue there that you need in building that communication and camaraderie at the offensive line is huge, because man, it was so just discombobulated, I feel like, under Atkins the last few years, and just not understanding who was going to be out there sometimes on Saturdays, and shuffling, not even just on Saturdays, but on a series to series type of aspect, man. Absolutely hated it. But now hopefully just seeing some chemistry from this offensive line, it's going to be held a lot on what Pettibon brings to Florida State's offensive line in 2025. And then finishing off, though, was Squirrel White, the transfer from Tennessee. He talked to the media, and I think my biggest takeaway from this, he spoke on his injuries that he's suffered quite a bit during his time in Tennessee, specifically last year as well, where he had to spend some time recovering. But he did say that he's expected to be fully ready to roll for the spring, saying that he had to deal with some adversity this last season, but it felt like there was nothing that I couldn't handle. As far as terms of me being ready to go, I'm ready to go. I'm always ready to go. I'm healthy, so I'll be ready to go this spring. So I think that's really good news for FSU as they try to start building on the field chemistry and practices between Thomas Castellanos, Squirrel White, and guys like Deuce Robinson as well, and also just all across the board, and getting a groove into this new system under Gus Malzahn.
I'm just surprised you didn't tell the Squirrel origin name story.
No, I did not. And it was, if you want to go into detail about that, Dustin, for your big takeaway from Squirrel White, floor is yours.
Yeah, from what I remember, he was a child, and he was at his grandma's house, and they were out back in her garden, and a squirrel moved and he moved, and then they were both moving at the same time. And then from then on, she just began to call him Squirrel. And he didn't like the nickname originally, but then, teachers started calling that, friends, coaches, and eventually it just stuck. And, he's been sticking with it ever since then. But, he did mention that he sees some similarities between Tennessee's offense, the program he's coming over from, and in Florida State's offense. Mentioned flat outly, I feel like if you get the ball in my hands, I'm able to do anything with it. And, also when to talk about returning punts at Florida State, contributing on special teams, which he also did with the Volunteers. And he said, if the special teams coach said that he wants me to return punts, I'm going to return punts. I'm going to do whatever they need me to do. Just like I said, when I get the ball in my hands, I'm special and I can do anything. So I think what pops out to me is this guy is confident. He's obviously a veteran playmaker who had a very productive career at Tennessee, and he's thinking that he can do it even bigger and better in Tallahassee in 2025.
Yeah, I don't know that I would add anything more to that other than just he's trying to build chemistry with Deuce Robinson. Obviously, they were just coming in, or they're coming in together. But yeah, like you said, seems very confident in his abilities. Hopefully, he can stay healthy for this upcoming season, because like we mentioned when we first committed, they don't really have a guy on this roster like him. And he's going to be able to do some things with the ball in his hands that nobody else can do. So that's going to be big for this offense.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 100%. So that was the wrap up there from those three interviews. We're going to have a ton going all the way through the end of November on newcomer interviews. So stay
November.
tuned. Did I say November? I'm going to say February. Ooh, goddamn.
Very different.
Kind of feels like how it is with this new roster. So many new names coming in, transfers, recruits, coaching staff. It's like, damn. But yeah, that is the wrap up there for that. Any basketball to finish us off with?
I don't want to talk about it. We could just
we'll wait on that. We'll pause that.
We can wait.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. What about that? What about Super Bowl? We can talk.
Yeah, I was gonna say Super Bowl Seminoles.
We can talk Super Bowl Seminoles right here, right now. How do y'all feel about this Super Bowl? First off, going into it, Chiefs are back into it, and then you've got the Eagles. I think it's two teams that not a lot of the NFL fans are really excited for.
Yeah, I mean, from a business perspective, I'm absolutely heartbroken that the Washington Commanders did not advance to the Super Bowl.
As a team that we cover, for some context for those that are listening, yes, we started covering them earlier this season. Little did we know, though, this would be the season that we would have, and it extend all the way till this last weekend. But that was a heartbreaker, because I was planning on going to New Orleans there to help with our Commanders game day team to cover it, but couldn't pull it away. Too many mistakes, man. Commanders, I mean, way too many mistakes giving the ball away. You just can't do that in a championship like that.
Disappointed with that, but man, I do not want to see the Kansas City Chiefs win again. I'm sorry, Derek Nottie. I'm sorry, Fabo. But man, I'm over it.
See, I'm the other way. I do not want Philly sports fans getting another Super Bowl win. They're obnoxious enough. I can't have them win another one.
You know, yeah, like I guess
I-
both. That's why
Like
teams
Kansas City's already a dynasty. Just keep it going. I can't have Philly fans being any more obnoxious than they already are.
I understand it from that perspective as well, because man, they were doing some crazy stuff after that Commanders game.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Because I'm not.
No, I mean that's just how they are. They're wild, man. They're wild. It's just like two teams that I think everybody didn't really want to see. They kind of want to see that Cinderella story with Jaden Daniels. He's a good guy that's easy to pull for, you know. And then, of course, everybody was riding on Josh Allen to save America and beat the Chiefs, and they just can't do it. They
can't beat the refs too. I mean, they beat the Chiefs. They can't beat the refs. You're telling me that wasn't a first down?
That
you just can't put yourself in that situation, though. You just can't put yourself in the situation because you are facing the refs as well.
They can't run QB sneak to the left every single time because I don't think it worked once, and they tried it 8 times. Like, hey, try going to the right, maybe, or give it to James Cook or Ray Davis or something other than QB pull to the left because it never worked. Yeah. But I do agree he did get that first down. Everything else I wasn't too mad about officiating wise. You know, that crazy long completed pass that was called a catch. I don't even know how to describe what that play was, where it kind of looked like it was intercepted, but it ended up being incompletion. You know, if anything, it would have been an incompletion, but there was also defensive holding on the play, so it really didn't matter. You know, really that not getting that first down was the only one I thought was egregious.
Yeah, there was a lot of shots that Josh Allen was taking with Keon Coleman in that game. Those two just could not connect, and you know, Josh, there wasn't some great balls. They were able to get a PI call on one of them, and also too, he tried going into the end zone with Keon on a one-on-one opportunity, but ball wasn't there. Just things, and it didn't click there for the Bills, and here we are. Now it's a Super Bowl matchup between the Chiefs and the Eagles. We won't do predictions now, but you've got a few Seminoles on that Eagles squad as well that will be pulling for. Johnny Wilson is there, who has been utilized a little bit. He's out there. He's mainly used on some blocking schemes since he's been excellent in that regard for the Eagles. Also to Josh Sweat, who had a really big season last year, also has had a solid season as well too. But overall, you know, I don't know how to feel about the Super Bowl this year. I mean, I'm fine with it. I think it'll be a good game, which is good. Like, I'll take a good game out of it. Like, I hope this goes all the way into the fourth quarter and whatnot. But I kind of see where this is headed, and I think they're gonna make history and get their three-peat for the Chiefs. I mean, it just seems that way.
Yeah.
Either way, though, someone on FSU's 2023 ACC championship squad is going to go from a conference ring to a Super Bowl ring. Is it going to be Fabo or is it going to be Johnny Wilson? And also, if the Chiefs win, you're going to be seeing some FSU program tying history. It'll give Derek Nottie his 4th Super Bowl, which will tie him with JT Thomas for the most Super Bowl wins by a former Florida State player.
Damn. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Derek Nottie gets notched up there. Wow. And he's almost about to be able to put on one hand alone Super Bowl rings. And that's just crazy to think of. And good for him. And the Chiefs also like keeping him around as well and keep re-signing him. So should be a fun one, though, overall. Hopefully a fun game in New Orleans between the Chiefs and the Eagles. I think that is going to wrap it up. Like I had mentioned earlier, we're going to have a lot of newcomer interviews that we'll be going over, some off-season topics that we'll be bringing to the table next week in our show. But that is going to do it. Before you leave on YouTube, if you don't mind, hit that like button. We would definitely appreciate it a ton. It helps it go out to more FSU fans. And also, too, hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot of videos going out all throughout the week to keep you guys entertained throughout this offseason, as it is very, very slow at the moment, but trying to get as much content to you guys as possible. But yes, that's going to do it. We will see you next week on Hear the Spear, and have a great rest of y'all's week. Thanks for watching.